Welcome to the How to Program with Java podcast, where all you need is the desire to learn, and you too can become a Java programmer with absolutely no knowledge of programming. And now, your host, Trevor Page.
Okay, hello everyone, and welcome back to episode number 5 of the How to Program with Java podcast. Today we're going to be talking about two things, syntax and tools. Two very exciting subjects in the realm of Java programming. So, let's get started. First one up is syntax. So let me give a little definition here from Wiki. It is, in computer science, the syntax of a programming language is the set of rules that define the combinations of symbols that are considered to be correctly structured programs in that language. Okay, so as always, these things are a little bit cryptic at best, which is really just a long-winded way of saying what I would define a syntax as being a particular layout of words and symbols that mean something to a given programming language. So a good way to put this into relatable terms is to think of this example. Think of an email address. When you see an email address written on the screen, you can immediately recognize it as being an email address, right? You see a name followed by an @ symbol, followed by some sort of, domain name, and then .com or .ca or .in or whatever, right? So why is it that when you see that, you immediately recognize it as being an email address? Well, that's because it's syntax. That syntax is embedded in your brain as meaning an email address, okay? So why is that? Why is it that when you see an email address, you know it's an email address? Like I said, it's syntax, but it's also the fact that how everything is laid out. It's laid out in such a way that you have the, first name or last name or just, in general, a name, followed by an @ symbol, followed by a domain, followed by the .com, .ca, .whatever extension, okay? It's a set of rules that are constructed that, when put together, you get an email address. So the same concept can be applied to programming syntax, or even just any, language in general, English, French, German, you name it. They all have a sort of set of rules that we need to follow in order to be correct when we use that language. So, in English, you have the I before E except after C rule, and I'm sure in French there are lots of rules around syntax, and you get the idea. So programming languages are no exception to this rule. Programming languages have a syntax that you must follow, and if you don't follow them, then I suppose the compiler or Java gets a little bit angry at you, and that's not fun. So really, in my experience, syntax is usually the toughest thing to grasp, at least for more experienced programmers. If you've already learned a programming language and you want to switch to another one, the syntax is usually what I find the most annoying part of learning another language. Again, it's just like switching from English to French. I mean, the syntax and the rules of the language are probably some of the most annoying things to go through. Although with spoken language, you have to speak it out loud, so that's obviously another aspect that makes things a little bit more difficult. So thankfully, we don't have to speak code out loud in order to write our programs. What makes programming nice is that when you learn the fundamental concepts that I've been teaching, you can take those concepts and you can apply them to other languages. So that's kind of nice. You can sort of learn something and be able to carry it with you throughout your essentially throughout your lifetime as a programmer. So that's nice. So really, like I said, in my experience, syntax is a thing that holds me back. But there is good news, okay? And the good news is that there are things called integrated development environments, okay, or IDE for short. These things are what you use. This is the tool that you use to program. And the reason why we use this tool to program is because it provides help with things like syntax. It helps to tell you when you've written something, written a piece of code that's incorrect. It will actually underline it in red, just like if you were to misspell something in Microsoft Word or something like that. It'll underline it and say, hey, you've spelled it wrong. Except in the case of an IDE, an integrated development environment, it underlines it to say you didn't get the syntax correct. So that's kind of nice that we have that tool at our disposal. So that's a good little overview of what syntax is. So in the Java programming language, the syntax is things like using keywords like if, or while for a loop, or the for a loop. You know what I mean? We've already discussed those topics already. So those all have a special syntax around how they should be used in programming. Now, hopefully, if you're good boys and good girls, you've gone to the How to Program with Java website and you've looked at the show notes, and you have studied the homework assignments that I'm giving to you so lovingly. Those you'll see examples of the for loop and the while loop and all those things, and you've seen the syntax. You would have seen things like while, and then you have the open round bracket, and then you have some sort of condition in there, and then you close your round bracket, and then you'll see a curly brace, an open curly brace. Okay, so these are all symbols that we use in the Java programming language to make up the syntax of whatever it is that you want to do in your actual program. So, having beat that dead horse, I don't want to go any further into what syntax is, because I find, again, it doesn't translate well over audio. You will need to go to howtoprogramwithjava.com/session5, because this is episode 5, to see the show notes and to see my new homework assignment for you. And this one's going to be very useful because when I'm about to transition into talking about tools, there's a great tutorial I have for setting up your first integrated development environment, okay, your IDE. So that will help you to install it and bring you through things step by step so that you can get up and running and get creating your first Java program, which is very exciting, very cool. So having said that, let's transition into the topic of tools. So I've already mentioned the integrated development environment. It helps you get the job done faster. If you really wanted to, you don't have to use an integrated development environment. You could just use Notepad if you wanted to write out your code and everything. You'd still have to put it through a compiler, but technically you could create your code in Notepad. But then you would miss out on some great features that the IDEs provide. Things like code completion, a compiler to check your syntax, the ability to click on methods and variables to jump to where they're defined. It gives nice color schemes to make your code more readable. Just tons of things that there's tons more things I can't think of off the top of my head that are very helpful. But especially for me, code completion is a really big bonus when you're using an IDE. So what is code completion? Well, when you are, let's say, typing in a variable name, let's say you've already defined a variable, let's say it's a string, and let's say it's the first name variable is what you've given to this variable name. You can actually start typing in first name. Let's say you type in FIRS, and then what you can do is you can hit Control and space on your keyboard. Control space. I'm all about shortcut keys, and you'll hear a lot of my shortcut keys. So try to memorize them as they're very useful. I love them. They make you much, much faster when you're programming. So yeah, you type in FIRS, and then you hit Control space, and you'll see a dialog will pop up, and it will show you a list of items that you may want to use. So again, if you've defined that first name variable somewhere above the line of code that you're currently typing in, you type in your FIRS, you hit Control space, and then voila, it should pop up and you should see first name. You can just hit the enter key, and then it'll type in first name for you. That's kind of a simplistic example of when that's useful, but nevertheless, you didn't have to type out the rest of the name of the variable, so that's useful. Saved a little bit of time. But for the code completion is really useful for methods. So if you are, let's see what's a good example. There is a sort of a utility class, which I won't talk about just yet, as that's a little bit more advanced. But let's say you type in string utils, and that's the name of the utility class, string utils, which is just short for string utilities. And it provides a whole bunch of different methods that allow you to manipulate strings, which is a very popular thing in Java, string manipulation. Actually, not just in Java, in any programming language. But string utils is specific to Java, so you type that in, and you say dot to access what methods it has, and then you'll see it will list all of the methods inside of the string utils utility class. So you'll see things like, to uppercase, to lowercase, to throw all the contents of the string to uppercase and to lowercase. I'm sure there's things like searching the string, things like, counting the number of, letters, or maybe, making the first letter of every word capital or something like that. There's all these different utilities that it has to let you modify your strings. But the point I'm driving at is that with code completion, you can see all of those methods. You don't have to know what the method is called. You don't have to look it up somewhere first. It's right there at your fingertips. When you hit Control Space, you'll see the list. So if you're using something like Notepad, if you weren't using an integrated development environment, you wouldn't have that. If you hit Control Space in Notepad, what's it going to do? It's probably going to just throw a space in, and tough luck. So it's very helpful, very useful. And plus things like, it applies a color scheme to your words, which is very, very useful when you're, reading code. It'll make, certain variables, variable types a different color. It'll make, your strings in quotes, it'll make it blue, and it'll turn all the keywords like if and while and return. It'll turn all those into like a purple color or something. So it makes the code much, much easier to read. So hopefully you are sold on the idea of using an IDE, as you should be, because I think every developer in the modern day uses an IDE when they're developing. So what is an IDE that you could use? Well, in my tutorials, I recommend the use of something called the Spring Source Tool Suite, okay? Or just STS for short. Spring Source Tool Suite. And this is available at springsource.org/STS. Okay, springsource.org/STS. And I'll put that in the show notes for you. And it's a free and easy to use IDE. It's fairly popular because it's based on another IDE called Eclipse, which you may or may not have heard of. They just took essentially what Eclipse is, and they just added a few additional features on top of it that make it useful when you get into more advanced topics in programming. So you don't need Spring Source Tool Suite right away. You could just use Eclipse if you wanted to, but I just prefer Spring Source Tool Suite because it really has a lot of great features in it, and that are very useful to me when I'm programming in my daily job. So there are other IDEs available. Most of them are free. Another popular one is NetBeans. I've used this one before. Really, I have nothing bad to say about NetBeans. I just prefer Spring Source Tool Suite is all. It's a personal preference. So, if you've already got NetBeans installed and you're already using it, then by all means, go ahead. Most of the topics that I'll be covering that are specific to the Spring Source Tool Suite IDE, you should be able to do in the NetBeans IDE, except the shortcut keys will be a little bit different, and there's just little differences is all. Another popular one is called IntelliJ, and IntelliJ, I believe you have to pay for. I haven't checked it out recently because the price tag was a little bit steep, but I think they may have released a free version. I'm not sure if this is like a free for personal use and not for corporate use or something like that. I have no idea, but I know IntelliJ was quite a powerful IDE, and I suppose it's one of those you get what you pay for things because you're paying for it. They pump it full of features. But for the most part, for what I needed to get my job done, the STS was good enough for me. So if you want to, you can go check those out. NetBeans, I'm not sure the website, what it is, but I can easily throw it into the show notes as well as the IntelliJ website. I'll throw that into the show notes as well. But like I said, for the remainder of these tutorials that I'm going to be doing and that are available on howtoprogramwithjava.com, they are all using Spring Source Tool Suite. Okay? So having said that, before you install an IDE, you'll first need to install something called the JDK, the Java Development Kit, okay? And this is just something that you needed to install because it allows you to write Java programs, actually write the programs and actually run the programs, okay? So don't get confused here. The Java Development Kit, like I said, is used to write and run programs. There's a Java Runtime Environment, JRE, but that's really only for running Java programs, okay? Hence the runtime environment. So I believe I haven't paid a whole lot of attention to these little details because usually you set it up once and then you never have to touch it again. So I've never gone into full crazy detail for understanding the JDK or the JRE. But I believe the JRE is actually inside of the JDK. It's part of it because, like I said, the JRE is a runtime environment, allows you to run the programs. But if the JDK, the Java Development Kit, also allows you to run programs, I could only assume that the JRE, the runtime environment, is included inside of this Java Development Kit. So your head might be spinning here with the different acronyms and everything that I'm throwing at you, but needless to say, you need to install the JDK first, and I have instructions, nice detailed instructions on how you can go about doing this in my homework assignment that I'm going to give you. Again, that's at howtoprogramwithjava.com/session5. Okay? I'll have all that there for you. You can follow, along step by step. Install the JDK, install your IDE, and then you will be primed and you will be ready to go to create your very first Java program. How does that sound? Sounds good to me, so I hope it sounds good to you. Very exciting stuff. So, having said that, I think that's a good overview of what syntax is. Again, syntax being the particular layout of words and symbols and stuff in order to make your programs do whatever it is you want to do. And an overview of tools, at least one tool that I think is very useful, is the IDE, the Integrated Development Environment. So having spoken about those two things, I think I will wrap it up. And not tomorrow, our next episode that I will be recording, hopefully in the near future, will be about your first Java program, okay? Your Java Hello World program, if you will. So I will bring you through that, talk about what it is that you need to do to get that fully set up and running, and we'll be good. You'll be on your way to becoming a real Java developer. How's that sound? So, thank you very much for tuning in, and if I could just get you to do one thing for me, one thing and one thing only, could you please go into iTunes, okay, and leave a review and a rating for this show, okay? All you need to do is fire up your iTunes program, whether that be on your computer or on your iPhone, and go to the podcasting section, again, either on your computer or on your phone, and just type in the name of this podcast, How to Program with Java. Search for it, you'll see my podcast pop up. You can just click on it and give it an actual rating for it. Okay, and it's best if you give an actual review as well and leave your name in there. You can say, "Hi, Trevor. Great podcast," or whatever you want to say. My name is so and so. Because that way, if you give me a great rating, then I'll be able to talk about you in future episodes, and I'll be able to say, "Hey, thanks very much, so and so, for giving me, a 5-star review." That's great. That's very helpful, and it allows other people to find the show. Because without any ratings, it doesn't appear high in the search algorithm. When you type in, Java podcast, no one will find us. So I really would love for you to give me a rating and a review. So we can get other people on board with learning how to become a programmer. Okay? Thank you so much, and I can't wait to see you in the next episode. So, bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the How to Program with Java podcast. Please visit howtoprogramwithjava.com for more useful Java tutorials.